Here's another thing that will happen in the millennium that might shock you. Although this isn't my primary source of authority, the rabbis take Jeremiah 39 and Ezekiel 37:25 and synthesize them in Tractate Sanhedrin 98b to say that David and the Messiah will rule in tandem, with the Mashiach being first in command and King David being second in command. It says, "And they shall serve Yahweh their Elohim, and David their king, whom I will establish for them." And then there's the verse from Ezekiel, which says, "And my servant David shall be their prince," or Nasi, forever. Now, in Tanakh, we read of David's throne being established forever. And this is accomplished in two ways: through the Messiah, also known as my servant the branch, who comes through the root of Jesse, so the lineage of David. So through David's line, we have rulership, right? And then the second way is that when David is physically resurrected, he will rule and reign with the saints for 1,000 years, as is prophesied in the book of Revelation. Because when we bring that together with what we see as the prophecies in written Tanakh and understand that Torah will lead us to Tanakh and Tanakh to the Brit Hadashah, then we get a full and clear picture of what's going to go on during that time. Even the rabbis recognize what the Tanakh says about the Messiah being mocked and disgraced, and therefore they would be mocked and disgraced for accepting the Messiah. This is why Rav Yosef says, "Let the Messiah come, and I will be privileged to sit in the shadow of his donkey's excrement. I am willing to undergo all the pain and disgrace associated with his arrival." The problem is, you missed it. You have a tradition that says that Mashiach ben David will resurrect Mashiach ben Yosef, but it was Elohim who resurrected Mashiach ben Yosef. In fact, Mashiach ben Yosef came, this is what he comes as the first time. It's interesting that you have two offices of Messiah. We believe it's one Messiah who fulfills one office in his first coming and the second office in his second coming. He said, "Nobody takes my life from me. I give it up myself and take it back." Isn't that something? The rabbis understood that the end times could be likened to birth pangs. We see this theme in both the book of Jeremiah and in Matthew, because it's supposed to be symbolic of how painful they will be. And so in Sanhedrin 98b, we also see that Eleazar's students asked Rabbi Eleazar, "What shall a person do to be spared from the pains preceding the coming of the Messiah?" Rabbi Eleazar said to them, "They shall engage in Torah study and acts of kindness." This is very biblical. Let's see why. In Revelation 3:10, the Rav Yeshua says, "Since you have kept my command to endure patiently." That means to endure in his words, endure in his commandments, endure in Torah. "I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth." What was the church of Philadelphia known for, according to the Bible and according to history? For their generosity towards each other, for their acts of kindness towards each other. Now, I agree with what the rabbis say in the Talmud when they state that death and the Day of Atonement make atonement. But according to Torah, it better be a bloody, gory death because of Leviticus chapter 17 and verse 11. Now, I know that in Judaism, the concept of vicarious atonement is totally outlawed because it says in Torah that the son shall not die for the sins of his father, nor the father for the sins of his son. That's very clear. And that the people's teeth would be set on edge. I mean, that's crystal clear. Couldn't get clearer as a general rule. And there are a couple verses in Tanakh where the rabbis will say this person dying for their disobedience or that person dying for their disobedience makes atonement for such and such people. Generally, that's a marginal opinion. But what I will say is this, right? We do have a general rule that God doesn't accept human sacrifice. 100%, I'm all for that altogether. I would never unalive another human for my sins or for anybody else's sins. However, the prophets are very clear that there is the exception of God's servant, the branch. God's servant, the branch, is the exception to the rule. Now, just because Yahweh gives Moshe the rules on Mount Sinai doesn't mean that there aren't any exceptions. For example, take this halakhic exception into consideration. When a person in the land of Israel comes across an animal that has died of itself, if they're part of the nation, they're not allowed to eat it because it's a prohibition. It's a what we call a negative commandment. But they are allowed to sell it to a foreigner and a foreigner may consume it. Wait, so does that mean God no longer treats foreigners and the native born the same? No, not at all, because for the most part, everything else is the same. And the same is the case with sacrifices and offerings. Here's another exception, and there are quite a few more that I could mention. But God tells the Israelites not to marry the harlots of the Amorites, the Jebusites, the Perizzites, and all the ites that are in the land. I might have not said Canaanites, but all the ites, all right? What does God tell Hosea to do, the prophet Hosea? He says, go marry a harlot. Why? Because the people of Israel have been disobedient towards me in their whoring after other gods. So God might have to illustrate something. He might have a specific mission to accomplish. And even though God generally outlaws vicarious atonement in Torah, he had a specific mission to accomplish by sending the Messiah, who is a manifestation of himself. It's interesting because in Zechariah 9:11, which is right after God speaks to the prophet Zechariah in the divine third person about what the Messiah will do while he is here on earth for the second time to restore the people, to restore the land, to restore the covenant of Yahweh, it says, as for you, because of the blood of my covenant with you. So he calls this the Messiah's covenant. I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit. This is why, when I see rabbis like Tovia Singer discredit the Christian theology towards the angel of the Lord, they don't really understand what they're saying or what they're talking about. They say it was just an angel. But then you can't really get down to explaining how it is that Moses saw God face to face, yet saw his hand in his back, only saw his hand in his back. Well, the Hebrew word for glory, let's look it up. It's significant because when Moses, said to Yahweh, I pray thee, show me your glory. The Hebrew word for glory is kavod, which denotes weight or heaviness in the literal sense. Yahweh was essentially being told by Moses, show me your full weight. Because Moses was talking to a theophany, he was talking to a manifestation. But he was saying, show me everything. And what did Yahweh say? I can't do that for you. So when Yahweh told Moses, Vayomer hareini na et vodecha, he was saying, you can't see everything of me. I'll give you a part of me. I won't give you everything. I won't give you my full unmediated weight. I'll give you a partial mediated weight. So that's how Moses can see God face to face, yet not see God face to face. It acts as an apparent contradiction, but it's not, because you have to learn how to harmonize the scriptures. And that's the problem. That's a trap I see so many people falling into. They don't know how to harmonize the scripture. So then what they do is they go way off the rails into all different sorts of false doctrines. And that's not where I want to go. That's not where I want anyone to go. I'm in it for the truth. I'm here to do what it says in the Gospel of Yochanan or John, to worship God in spirit or truth, however I can. Let me be of service. If God says to provide money to the church, then I do that. If God says to get up on this platform, use the talents that he has given me to teach his word to the nations and to those even within the nation, then I teach to the nations and I teach to those within the nation. Hopefully that clears up some things. I just thought I would share that with you. God bless.